It's time now for the political analysis of Fromm and Fuller. Al Fromm, former political advisor to President Bill Clinton, and Craig Fuller, former political advisor to both Presidents Ronald Reagan and George H.W. Bush. Good morning, all. Well, Craig, we're going to start with you this morning. I'd like to talk to you a little bit about Ohio and the results, but as we continue to watch Donald Trump running again, it's just amazing what he's almost trying to sabotage himself. He just said a couple of days ago that any Jewish person who votes for Democrats hates their religion and everything about Israel. I mean, it's just out of hand. And yet, here he is.
Well, here he is indeed. I have long thought that if you look up the definition of sociopath or a narcissist, the characteristics are those of Donald Trump. I mean, that's been true for a long time. It was true back in 2016. He cares solely about himself. He has no empathy for others. And the narcissism quotient seems to be increasing. Where you're either loyal to him and voting for him, or you're somehow, misguided, the enemy or whatever. And he's at the crazy thing about this is he's at a point in his campaign where he needs to be building a coalition, broadening his base. And instead, he's playing to what I hope is a narrow base of America, but he's playing to his base. He's going to these rallies where all the filters just seem to keep coming off. And he says things that are highly offensive. The anti-Semitism issue didn't just pop up a few days ago. I mean, this has been going on for a long time. And he seems to be very confused about the American Jewish community. Looking back, you see statements where he's speaking to an American Jewish audience and about Israel, and he tells them that we love their country as much as they do, as though somehow these Americans are citizens of Israel. It's just really, honestly, mind-boggling. And he to be successful, he has to reach into independents, to Republicans who were very troubled by the things he says, and rather than appealing to them, to us, I might add, he seems to be going in the opposite direction. I really think he's already laying the groundwork for election results that run against him, that he will claim are false. So there is no logical explanation except that the sort of the makeup of the man is really running counter to what he needs to be doing if he hopes to win in November.
Al, I guess you're not shocked, but what's your thoughts?
Donald Trump seems to speak derogatorily about every group, whoever is his enemy of the day, or whoever, whenever he thinks he can get advantage with, I guess, his base by speaking negatively or derogatorily about a group. I'm not shocked that he did this. I mean, a lot of people in the Jewish community believe that this is an old anti-Semitic trope of, implying that Jews have dual loyalty to the United States and Israel. But as Craig says, this is not new. Remember at Charlottesville, when the Nazis were shouting anti-Semitic slogans, Trump said there were good people on both sides. So this is a normal position for him. There are two things that I just want to raise a little bit on this. What strikes me is the point Craig makes every week, which is Donald Trump should be about addition, and he's really about subtraction. I mean, he has a solid base. It was a little over 47% in 2016, a little higher than that, but still under 48%. So he has about a 47 in 2020. So it's about a 47% ceiling. But what he does is he talks to the people who already voted for him. He doesn't talk to the people he has to win over. As we discussed last week when we discussed the third parties, Trump's base in the states that are going to decide the election is a little bit bigger. But he got the same vote both years, not enough to win a majority, but 48.8%. But the other thing about those states, and particularly the three states in the Midwest, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, is Trump's base is non-college white voters who didn't go to college. And those states are much more filled with those voters than other states. So what it really tells me is that Trump's strategy is double down on your base, get as many white non-college voters out as you can, particularly in those swing states, and then get third-party candidates in to drive down the Biden vote, because so much of the Biden vote is anti-Trump rather than pro-Biden. And so I think that's what we're seeing. It's something that I think voters who care about democracy in this country have to think about. But to me, that seems to be very clear.
Yeah. Well, let's move on to Ohio, Craig. And, I think a lot of people, many Democrats were celebrating that the Trump pick for the Senate race there won that election. But I'm having a little bit of a deja vu experience with thinking about V.D. Vance and this prediction that the Trump candidate would be too extreme. But here we are.
Let me address that by picking up on something that Al just said, which has to do with people who vote against somebody more than for somebody. And an Amy Walter analysis really kind of confirms that, meaning that when it comes to Trump and Biden, a significant percentage of those who vote for Biden are voting against Trump, but also when it comes to Trump, a significant number are voting against Biden. It's this dissatisfied voter phenomenon that clearly is growing at the presidential level. Now, that's going to be a factor at the national level, no doubt about it. So when it comes to a Senate race in Ohio, you had the outgoing Republican senator, the Republican governor, both of whom have won statewide office, both who have a pretty good share of popular support in their state, backing a candidate other than Trump's candidate. Trump just couldn't abide that. He demands absolute loyalty, so he lands on a candidate who is closely aligned, I guess, to Trump's views. We don't know a whole lot because I'm sure that Bernie Moreno is a successful car dealer. He's never been an elected official, so we don't really know how he would vote. But his positions have tended to be moving in a direction that causes Trump to support him. And the reason I say that this voting against phenomenon doesn't work the same way is that Sherrod Brown, the incumbent Democrat, is pretty well regarded in the state. And so Trump has chosen to advance somebody who's probably got the most difficult chance of winning. Could he win? Yes. But I suspect that Republicans who have successfully won in statewide races had a better idea than Trump about who would be the strongest opponent to an incumbent senator. But that doesn't matter to Trump because he just wants somebody who's loyal to him. He does this, of course, by putting the chance for a Republican majority in the Senate at risk. But that doesn't matter to him. Again, he has no empathy. He has no feelings for what might affect others. He's only interested in what impacts him. So I don't know how Ohio's going to turn out, but I suspect that in this case, when you have a strong incumbent running, that the outcome is not looking favorable, in my view, for Republicans.
Al, good day for the Democrats in Ohio?
Not really. I mean, Sherrod Brown's a good candidate, but Tim Ryan was a good candidate too in 2022. J.D. Vance was not exactly what I would say the most mainstream candidate. And, he was a Trumpy who won it because Ohio has become a very red state. It's a very different state than it was when Sherrod Brown first won in 2006, which was a Democratic year. He wins in 2012 when Obama's leading the ticket. But since then, Ohio's gotten a lot more red. And Sherrod had the good fortune to run in the big anti-Trump year of 2018. So this is going to be a different context for him with Trump running on the ballot. But I think there's a really important story for the Republicans. I read a piece that Jonathan Martin, who's now with Politico, wrote. Mike DeWine, the governor, who's been a pretty good Republican governor, I'd call him he's conservative, but he's a mainstream guy. Rob Portman, who was the retired Republican senator, they saw this as the last chance, in a sense, to defeat the Trump wing of the party. And they had a perfect candidate, State Senator Matt Dolan. His family owns the Cleveland Guardians. He ran before, and he ran in the primary against Vance, so he's got good name recognition. I think they thought this was an ideal circumstance to try to sneak by a Trump candidate. And what happened? And it was a three-way race. That's the other point. And the other candidate was bidding for Trump's endorsement. So basically, he had two Trumpers. One he endorsed, and the mainstream candidate, and Bernie Moreno, a car dealer who has views that on a lot of issues like Ukraine that are similar to Trump, pretty pro-Putin from what I understand, won a majority vote, won over 50%, won by about 14 or 15%. To me, the most telling thing about that primary and about what's happened to the Republican Party is that among the people who voted in the Republican primary, 65% were election deniers. That's what the Republican Party has become. Dolan won. Almost 60% of people who thought the 2020 election was legitimate, but Moreno won a majority of the election deniers. And so that's where the party is.
Yeah.
Trump's big lie has taken over the Republican Party. And as we have discussed in weeks past, Trump, unlike our presidents, went in and he took over these state parties and he controls the apparatus. He now has ideological and operational control of the Republican Party. And until he's defeated, I think the Republican Party is going to be doing what it did in Ohio.
Yeah. Hey, Craig, before we leave, yesterday there was a poll showing that former Governor Hogan is significantly ahead of his Democratic rivals by a significant number. And I was just kind of curious on your take on that.
Yeah, I saw that. I think you have to realize that former Governor Hogan is a very familiar name to people in the state of Maryland, favorably viewed by Republicans and Democrats and by independents. Probably a lot of that is a name identification contest where people simply have voted for him before, know more about him, even though there's strong campaigns being run by Democrats. They tended to be, members of Congress, so they have a narrower constituency than he had. At the end of the day, I think that you will see a very strong campaign against Larry Hogan, and these numbers will tighten considerably. He is a Republican who can win in Maryland, but I think his race there is going to be very close, and this early polling again, does not predict what's going to happen. It just tells you what's on people's minds as of today.
Al, any final thoughts on Hogan?
Well, I think Hogan's going to be a strong candidate, but I still expect that the seat will stay Democratic, in part for the reasons that Craig just mentioned. This is a Washington Post poll. I actually had some when they used to do it with the University of Maryland. I actually had something to do with this, the beginning of that poll, and the first poll they ever did was a poll that said Anthony Brown was going to defeat Larry Hogan. And I remember being the moderator at the event at the University of Maryland where we released that poll. I mean, I think there are a couple of things that are really important in the poll. I mean, one, Hogan, no doubt, has got broad support, and he's very popular, even with Democrats. I think his approval ratings were in the 60s with Democrats, so that's pretty good in today's world. But neither of the Democratic candidates were, I mean, over half the voters did not know either of the Democratic candidates. So when their name recognition is increased, it'll change things. The Democratic primary race is more interesting than I thought it would be. I mean, I thought Angela Alsobrooks would sail away, but David Trone, with an incredible advertising campaign, I mean, I think really good ads, and he's put a gazillion dollars into it, has drawn ahead a little bit. Alsobrooks is just going on the air now, but don't forget, David Trone has a big base in Montgomery County, which is the biggest county, and Alsobrooks has a strong base in Georges County, and the Washington suburbs are really in the new Maryland, where a lot of these things are going to be decided. So I think it's a little early to make a judgment. I mean, remember, in the governor's race, Craig and I were saying that Wes Moore had a really good chance of being governor when he was about 4% or 5%. Hogan will run a good race, but he's in a state that Biden won by 33 points. That's a lot of ticket switching to pull in a Republican senator. So he ought to enjoy the early polls. But what happens to candidates who are out of office and come back, they automatically get a big vote at the beginning because everybody knows them. But after the campaign, and Hogan I think will be pretty strong throughout the whole campaign because he was well liked by members of both parties. But after the campaign, gets joined, it's a lot harder to keep those numbers up because people are reminded, not everybody liked Hogan, and the people who didn't like him but sort of say, well, he's a name that's familiar to me, are going to be reminded of why they didn't like him in the campaign. Yeah. And so I once worked in a Senate race where my candidate, it was a Democratic primary, but my candidate had a 20-point lead 4 months out, and my pollster said, if he's not up to 40 points with 6 weeks out, he's going to lose. He stayed at 20. He lost by 20. So these things change.
Yeah, but one more quick point I want to make, and that is, if on the Wednesday in November following the Tuesday election, Governor Wes Moore wakes up and Larry Hogan has won, Democrats will be very disappointed in this very attractive Democratic governor that we have in Maryland. He will do everything possible to assure his Democratic colleagues that he can help hold the Senate.
Well, we have to leave it there. Al Fromm, Craig Fuller, thank you so much indeed. We will see you next week.